saygıdeğer hocalarım, değerli meslektaşlarım, 8. Uluslararası Psikofarmakoloji Kongresi ve 4. Uluslararası Çocuk ve Ergen Psikofarmakolojisi Sempozyumuna hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Öncelikle bilimsel açıdan son derece zengin ve doyurucu bir kongre geçirmenizi diliyorum. İlk olarak kongremizle ilgili kısa bir klibimiz olacak. Ardından kongre başkanımız Sayın Profesör Doktor Mesut Çetin kongre hakkında bilgiler verecek. Buyurun.
Şey ne? Ee, 8. Uluslararası Psikofarmakoloji Kongresi ve 4. Uluslararası Çocuk ve Ergen Psikofarmakoloji Sempozyumuna hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Psikofarmakoloji Derneği 2005 yılında kuruldu bildiğiniz gibi. Yaklaşık bir 11 senelik dönem geçti. Bu süre zarfında oldukça hep birlikte güzel şeylere imza attık. Bunlardan bizi ilk daha kurarken, bu derneği kurarken belli amaçlarımız vardı. Bunlardan bir tanesi şuydu: bilim, tüm insanlığın mirası, ortak bir mirastır inancındaydık, düşüncesindeydik ve bunun hiçbir milliyetinin olmadığını biliyorduk. Ve bu bilimin öğrenilip paylaşılmasının bizim esas amaçlarımızdan biri olduğunu düşüncesinde ve inancında bu derneği kurmuştuk. Geçen bu 11 sene zarfında bir sürü kongreler oluşturuldu. Bunun dışında çeşitli kurslar, sempozyumlar, kitap çalışmaları ve 2 adet de dergimiz var bildiğiniz gibi. Bu dergiler de yine baştan itibaren tamamen ücretsiz olarak sizlerin kullanımına sunulmaktadır. Bu da yine bizim paylaşım inancımızın, düşüncemizin bir sonucudur. Sizlerin desteği ve gayretiyle her geçen gün daha iyi konulara gideceğimize inanıyoruz. Bizi özellikle baştan beri destekleyen, burada defalarca katılan Üstad Brian Lavanar'da çok teşekkür ederim. 3. kez geldi. Yine David Nutt 2. kez katılıyor. 2007'de katılmıştı kongremize. Angelos Halaris de 2. kez katılıyor. Çok teşekkür ediyorum kendilerine. Ve burada isimlerini sayamadım. 200 civarında, hatta daha fazla konuşmacıyı konuk ettik. Bu konuşmacılar bildiğiniz gibi dünyanın dört yanından gelen ve gerçekten çok değerli konuşmacılar. Bu konuşmacılar bize kendi birikimlerini ve deneyimlerini paylaştılar. Bu kongreler bildiğiniz gibi bu tür tanışmaların, kaynaşmaların bir ortam oluyor, arenası oluyor. Ve bizim amaçlarımızdan bir tanesi hem dergileri çıkarırken hem de bu kongreleri yaparken diğer bir şey de bu tür toplantılarda bir network oluşturmak ve insanları, bütün Türkiye'deki birikimleri aktarmak dünya mirasına ve oradaki birikimlerden de faydalanmaktı. Yine paylaşım ön plandaydı. Ben organizasyon komitesine çok teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Başta Brian Lavanar çok özverili bir şekilde bize ve samimi bir şekilde kendini açtı ve network'ünü kullanmamıza ve onlarla ilgili bağlantılar kurmamıza çok yardımcı oldu. Rengi Hocam baştan beri 4 senedir çok güzel bir şekilde ve gerçekten ilginç, çok takdir ettiğim bir çocuk ve ergen psikofarmakoloji şeyini baştan aşağı programına hazırlıyor ve güzel bir şekilde bunu götürüyor ve biz çocuk ve ergencilerin katılmasıyla beraber çok büyük bir güç aldığımıza inanıyorum. Gerçekten zaten bu hastalıklar baştan itibaren, çocukluktan itibaren devam eden hastalıklar birçoğu ve çocuk ve ergencilerin de bize katılmasıyla beraber çok daha büyük güç aldı kongremiz ve bu sene yaklaşık 1200 bir katılım oldu ve gerçekten bu kadar koşulların uygun olmadığı bir ortamda bunu gerçekleştirmiş olmamız da talebin ne kadar fazla olduğunu gösteriyor, ne kadar isabetli seçimler yaptığımızı gösteriyor. Ben onun için tekrar teşekkür ediyorum düzenleme kuruluna. Nazan Aydın Hocam da bildiğiniz gibi çok değerli bir bilim adamı, insanı, özür dilerim. Nazan Hocam IPT, yani Kişiler Arası İlişkiler Derneği Başkanı aynı zamanda ve bunu Türkiye'ye getiren kişi. Aynı zamanda kadın ruh sağlığı üzerinde önemli çalışmaları var ve kendisi kongremizde de düzenleme kurulunda oldukça aktifti. Özellikle mobil aplikasyon konusunda çok güzel şeyler buldu kendisi ve gerçekten bu biraz sonra söyleyeceğim mobil aplikasyonu kullanmanız sizin işlerinizi kolaylaştıracaktır. Pratik bir şey. Serdar Hocam'ı baştan itibaren, ta 2005'ten itibaren hiç bırakmadık. O da bizi bırakmadı sağ olsun. Serdar 10.000 kilometreden fazla herhalde aramızda mesafe olmasına rağmen her an birlikteydik Serdar'la. Çünkü bir klavye mesafesindeydi Serdar. Onun için kendisinin desteklerinden dolayı çok teşekkür ediyorum. Serdar aynı zamanda çok değerli ve mütevazi bir bilim adamı. Ve o yüzden de oldukça sempatik ve çok seviliyor arkadaşlarımız tarafından. Her sene dört gözle bekleniyor. Cengiz Hocam'ı asistanından beri tanıyorum. Cengiz Hocam da çok değerli katkılarda bulundu bu kongremiz için. Yine Recep Tütüncü de sekreterya olarak kongremizi oldukça önemli yüklerini omuzladı. Kendilerine çok teşekkür ediyorum. Burada özel teşekkür etmek istediğim tabii Feyza Hocam var. Feyza Hocam da baştan itibaren bütün kongrelerimizde olduğu gibi bu kongrede de değerli birikimlerini ve yine yardımlarını esirgemedi. Kendisine çok teşekkür ediyorum. Yine uzakta olmasına rağmen Amerika temsilcimiz Samet Köse her alanda bize yardımcı oldu. Hem kongrenin İngilizce edisyonlarında hem de sanatsal birikimiyle oldukça bize faydalı ve katkılarda bulundu. Kendisine çok teşekkür ediyorum. İnşallah gelecek sene Samet Köse'yi de burada konuk etmek, onun birikimlerinden de istifade etmek dileğindeyiz. Evet, Nazan Hocam'a tekrar teşekkür ederim. Yani bu arada bu konuda çok güzel şeyler başardı. Bu aplikasyonu, mobil aplikasyonu hem iOS hem de Android'de indirilebiliyor. Gayet de güzel çalışıyor. ICP 2016 girildiği takdirde, oradan indirildiği takdirde oldukça faydalı. Ve programa giriyorsunuz. Programda istediğiniz kısımları işaretlediğinizde, yıldızladığınızda, ajandanızda gözüküyor. Kendi ajandanız oluyor. Hangi toplantılara girmek istiyorsanız bu toplantıları siz rahat bir şekilde takip edebiliyorsunuz. Çünkü bu kongre oldukça talep üzerine paralel sunumların çok fazla olduğu bir kongre oldu. 7 paralel oturumumuz var. Dolayısıyla hepsini takip etmek gerçekten çok zor. Bu mobil aplikasyon bize oldukça faydalı oldu. Mehtap Hanım'a da çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Kendisi 3 seneden beri bize kendi birimini Bakırköy Gündüz Hastanesi'nin sorumlusu biliyorsunuz. 3 sene önce kendisi bize orada hastaların yaptığı yağlı boya tablo koleksiyonunu getirmişti, sergisini yapmıştı. Geçen sene seramik sanatçılarının, yani seramik eserlerini getirmişti. Yine bunlar oranın hastaları, Gündüz Hastanesi'nin, Bakırköy İstanbul Gündüz Hastanesi'nin eserleri, hastalarının eserleriydi. Yarın açılışını yapacağımız bu tahta yakma sanatı, pirografi sergisi de 14 Ağustos'ta yukarı katta, bir üst katta fuayede açılışını yapacağız ve onların da ne kadar güzel olduğunu beğeniyle izleyeceksiniz. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz kendisine. Evet, bu toplantıya katılan uluslararası seçkin konuşmacılara çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Çünkü bildiğiniz gibi bölgede olumsuz koşullara rağmen bir yerde büyük bir fedakarlıkla katıldılar. Ben kendilerini burada alkışlamak istiyorum. Bilimin bilimi paylaşmanın verdiği bu güzel şeyi, faziletli işi yaptıklarından dolayı oldukça minnettarım kendilerine ve şükranesilerimi iletiyorum. Yine bu kongrede partner derneklerle ilişkilerimiz devam ediyor ve hemen hemen her dernekten burada gördüğünüz katılımcılar var. Dünyanın dört bir yanından. Kendilerine çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sponsorlara teşekkür ediyorum. Onlar olmasaydı bu kadar büyük çapta ve kaliteli bir kongre oluşmazdı. Ve bundan sonra da bu desteklerinin artarak devamını diliyorum. Kongre hakkında kısa bilgiler vermek istiyorum. 1200 katılımcı demiştim yaklaşık olarak 7 paralel sunum var. Salonda sunum olacak. Ve bize 800 civarında bir şey gelmişti. Prezentasyon. Bunlardan 600'üne yakını seçtik ve bunlar 3 gün boyunca her parça parça sunulacaklar dışarıdaki alanda. Ben bu arada ajandalarınıza gelecek kongrenin not almanızı rica ediyorum. 26-30 Nisan'da Antalya'da yine buluşmayı diliyorum. Ve de güzel, verimli bir kongre yanında Antalya'nın tarihi ve güzel doğal güzelliklerini izlemenizi ve onlardan faydalanmanızı diliyorum. Bu arada bir arkadaşımızı kaybettik. Doktor Funda Süleyman Kurt. O da kongremize katılacaktı. Doğum komplikasyonu sonucunda vefat etti. Onu da rahmetle anıyoruz. Dediğim gibi bu kongre her yıl gençlerin bu şeyi Bengi Hocam verdi, onu okuyorum, kusura bakmayın. Bu kongre her yıl yeni gençlerin büyük bir istek, aktif katılımı sonrası hem gençleşiyor hem bilimsel kalitesi artıyor. Onlar bizim çıtamızı yükselterek daha iyisini yapmaya çalışıyoruz. Bu yıl hem kongre öncesinde kongre mutluluğumuza gölge düşen acı bir haber geldi. Demin söylediğim gibi. Genç ve çocuk ergen psikiyatristi Funda Süleyman Kurt'u doğum sonrası komplikasyon sonucu kaybettik. Az önce de söylediğim gibi. Kendisi buraya da katılacaktı. Psikiyatri ve bilim adına çok şeyler yapabilecek parlak bir bilim insanıydı. Kendisini anıyor ve rahmet diliyoruz. Hepinize katılımlarınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ve Sayın Brian Leonard'ı konuşmalar için kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for your kind words. And I'm afraid I will have to address you in the language of cultural imperialism, English. But I know that from previous visits here, most of you are excellent in English, so I hope we get on. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, escaping from the rain, cold and wind of Ireland at this time of year, I can assure you, and coming to Antalya is a real pleasure. It's something I look forward to every April, and I certainly hope to be with you again next year. So thank you for the warning. I've been asked to say a few words about the importance of psychopharmacology, and again, I was very honored to be asked to join the team here for this particular meeting. Now, I've been in trade for some 40 years. In fact, I was one of the founder members of the British Association for Psychopharmacology, which was 1975, I think I'm right there in saying. we just celebrated last year a very important anniversary. And the change in psychopharmacology over that period has been absolutely phenomenal. Certainly way back in the 1960s, 50s and 60s when I was in training, the psychiatric hospitals in most of Europe in fact contained patients long-term, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, psychotic disorders and so forth. Young people, students, contemporaries of mine who entered these hospitals, these psychiatric institutions during at the age of anything between 18 and 22, 23, often remained in there for years, sometimes longer. Why? Because at that time, and we're talking about the 50s, there were no effective medications at all. And then the revolution started in psychopharmacology, which certainly many of us, including young David Nutt here, will remember, because we were involved, I think, in some of the very early studies. We believed that things go wrong in the brain because something happens to the brain amines, noradrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin. And all we had to do was to put chemicals in the brain to correct that, and wow, we have cured major psychiatric disorders. That was in the 1950s, we believed it, and it was wrong, absolutely wrong. And ever since that time, what have we been doing? Well, yes, we've been creating drugs, but basically the drugs we've been creating, effective though they may be, are much better now than they were in the 1950s, still have a long way to go. So why is therefore education important? Why is it important? And as the President outlined in his talk, science, and particularly psychopharmacology, is international. It's not only international, but that means that knowledge is international. And in fact, there is no one centre where all of the knowledge is contained. We need to share knowledge. We need to share knowledge about the drugs we're using, how we can use them better, and more particularly, how we can do better research to produce better drugs. And all of you working in the clinical fields know we have an enormous need for better drugs. Because the drugs we have, yes, they may ameliorate some of the extreme symptoms. They may make the quality of life of many of our patients that little bit better. But in terms of really treating the underlying disorders, no, they do very little to improve that. And at the end of the day, what are we dealing with also? We're dealing with the terminal stages which are becoming more and more prominent associated with dementia. And we have nothing of any major impact at all to treat dementing disorders, which are often the outcome of chronic, poorly treated or untreated major mental disorders. So that's why we're here, and that's why I notice that in this organization, which I must say I really enjoy very much, in this organization every year since its foundation the numbers have been increasing, and this year is the highest ever. And I think, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean that people, and particularly young people in training, like to come to a wonderful place like Antalya, for the sunshine, for the food and hospitality. It's because of the need, the increasing and growing realization that we need more knowledge, more education. And the best way we can do this is by interacting at organizations like the Turkish organization, the British organization, the CIMP, Canadian College, and so forth. And that, I think, emphasizes why psychopharmacology is important, why education is important, and why these meetings are absolutely crucial, I think, for sharing ideas, improving our clinical understanding, and particularly our treatment understanding. And we have a long, long way to go. There are no new drugs of any real import coming through for treating major psychiatric disorders. And what is causing many of the international organizations, like the CIMP, the ECNP, the DAP, major concern, and undoubtedly this one too, is when we look at the research going on, supported by pharmaceutical companies, they are stopping investing in the most important type of research for humanity at the present time, finding new, more effective psychotropic drugs. This is where I think we come in. This is why this type of meeting is important. This is why it's very important that you're all here and participating here in this meeting. With that, I will shut up and wish you all a very enjoyable few days here. It's an excellent, as always, an excellent program, a very, very busy program, and I think we will all be exhausted by the time Saturday comes, but hopefully very, very satisfied. Thank you all for your attention.
Değerli hocalarımıza çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Açılış törenimiz, açılış konferansı ile devam edecektir. Tekrar herkese hoş geldiniz der, saygılarımı sunarım.
Değerli meslektaşlarım, her sene psikofarmakolojideki gelişmeleri yakinen takip etme imkanını veren bu kongreden dolayı ben de başta Mesut Çetin hocamıza ve bu kongrede emeği olan bütün arkadaşlarımıza, dostlarımıza teşekkür etmek isterim. Burası hem bizler için hem mesleğine adım atmakta olan, mesleğiyle ilgili yeni kavrayışlar, anlayışlar geliştirmekte olan asistan arkadaşlarımız için, eğitim sürecindeki arkadaşlarımız için her sene etkinlikleriyle bir okul hüviyetini kazanmış durumda ve bu bereketliliğin, bu çeşitliliğin artarak sürmesini diliyorum. Bugün konuşmacımız, açılış konuşmasını yapmak üzere davet edeceğimiz konuşmacımız Profesör David Nutt. Bize ileri tanı sistemleri ve nörobilim temelli adlandırma konusunda bir konuşma yapacak. Nörobilim giderek artık mesleğimizin bir parçası olmaya doğru gidiyor. Aslında nörobilim bir bakıma psikiyatri içinde beyin araştırmaları mı, beyin eksenli bir psikiyatri mi yoksa psikoterapi mi şeklinde iki ayrı kulvar olarak özetleyebileceğimiz iki temel yaklaşımı da birleştiren bir hüviyet arz ediyor. Çünkü bu yarık telafi edilmediği sürece aslında değişik kampların değişik bir şekilde savunucusu olduğu ama birbirini anlamaya çalışmadıkları bir durum söz konusu oluyor. Bir dönem zihinsiz psikiyatriden bahsediliyordu. Daha önce beyinsiz psikiyatriden bahsediliyordu. Yani beyni hiç dikkate almayan bir psikiyatri ve zihni hiç dikkate almayan bir psikiyatri aslında nörobilim sayesinde aşılacak gibi görünüyor. Nörobilimin alanımıza sağladığı katkıları az sonra Profesör David Nutt'tan dinleyeceğiz. Kendisi Londra Imperial College'da öğretim üyesi. Depresyon konusunda çalışmaları var. Beyin görüntüleme ile ilgili çalışmaları var. ve yine bağımlılıkla ilgili çalışmaları var. Kendisi şu anda Avrupa Beyin Konseyi'nin başkanı durumunda. Ve daha önce de İngiliz Psikofarmakoloji Cemiyeti ve ENCP'nin de başkanlıklarını yürütmüş durumda. Professor Nat, I would like to welcome you on behalf of my colleagues to give the opening speech. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I can say it's great to be back. You saw that photo of me last time, no grey hair. So you see, you made me wait a very long time to come back, but hopefully it won't be another 8 years or whatever. Now this talk will go very well once I've worked out how to make the slides change. Thank you. Okay, good. So, when I was asked to give this introductory talk, I thought about what I could talk about, and it's always easiest to talk about things that you're doing and things that interest you. So I thought I'd share with you the way I am thinking about how we can explore questions relating to psychiatric disorder using imaging and psychopharmacology, and then in the end talk to you about a new initiative to try to communicate pharmacology in a more structured and integrated way, and finally show some new diagrams that we've been developing to really make it easy to understand psychopharmacology based on the London Tube map. So quite a lot to cover. Those are my disclosures if you're interested. So I'm going to focus on imaging, and I'm going to focus largely on MRI imaging because that's what most of you, if you have access to any imaging, have access to. And it's become a very powerful way of exploring the brain. We can produce wonderful structural analyses of brain function. This is now a fairly standard kind of structural image from a 3T machine. Many centres now have a 7T machine, which allows you to look at substructures, for instance, and even the hippocampus in some detail. So we're now able to look into the brain with a precision and resolution we've never had before. Will that be useful? Was measuring the brain useful? Well, it certainly can help people understand the dangers of certain drugs, particularly alcohol. So here you see 4 images. The bottom 4 images are 4 patients of ours in a clinical trial trying to develop a treatment to prevent relapse. So these are 4 people with significant alcohol dependence who are abstinent. And some of them have been abstinent for over a year. And you can see when you look at those images compared with the top images are 4 age and sex matched individuals who don't have alcohol dependence. And it's pretty obvious, you don't need to be a radiologist to see that those lower images are different. Those alcohol dependent people who are, as I say, abstinent, they're able to come to our laboratory to be studied on a regular basis, they can find their way around London. But their brains are very different. Their brains have much greater black areas, the black being CSF, water. And these brains, these 4 alcoholics, they're the worst examples of our cohort of some 35 alcoholics we're studying. But these brains are as damaged as the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. In fact, one could say that alcoholism is the only known treatable cause of dementia, because the brain damage produced by chronic drinking, and also the brain trauma that you get when people fall over when they're drunk or get hit when they're drunk can lead to these permanent changes in brain structure. So structure can be useful, at least in indicating possible damage, but also it presents a problem. I don't know if any of you are doing MRI imaging, but of course what we try to do when we're looking at functional MRI is we try to correlate activity in different brain regions. And if these regions are so different between the patients and the controls, it becomes really quite challenging to work out exactly, for instance, where is the nucleus accumbens or the amygdala in these brains and match it to the control brains. So we have serious issues of registration. And one of the interesting things we're doing, which I won't talk about today but can share with you subsequently, is trying to work out the best way of aligning damaged brains to allow us to make sure we don't have artifactual differences when we do fMRI type studies. Of course, we can also look at the tracts of the brain. This power of extracting the white matter tracts using diffusion tensor imaging is beautiful. These are wonderful images. They're so beautiful that every time one of our doctors leaves our unit, we give them their image of their own brain. That is provided they've been a subject for the study. And they proudly put it on the wall. And here you see these powerful connections ranging between different brain regions. And those are potentially important targets for at least making diagnostic differences between the different disorders. But still, it's early days. Where, of course, the biggest advance has been made has been in the technique of BOLD, or functional fMRI as it's called, blood oxygen level dependent BOLD MRI. And this was really one of the great breakthroughs in science. It came from the technology of having very powerful magnets, and also the fact that hemoglobin changes its magnetic properties when it loses oxygen atoms. And this change in magnetism can be detected in the MRI scanner. And as blood flow changes due to brain activity, we can then extrapolate to functional neuronal activity. And we now have thousands of people studied. There are probably several hundred papers now reporting activation of the amygdala. You can see those. Here's the amygdala, front on, activation of the amygdala, when people are shown a frightened face, a fearful face. And we know that drugs like SSRIs attenuate this effect. And some people, like Phil Cowan and Catherine Harmer, they believe that that is the primary site of action of these drugs, to reduce threat, to reduce stress, activation of the amygdala, and therefore allow depressed people to engage more normally with life. We've been interested in this from the perspective of looking at other forms of emotion. And we have developed a paradigm, and I will say to you now that if you are working in this field, we have worked up a series of MRI paradigms, which I'll talk more about on Friday in the workshop on addiction, which are designed to explore the key mechanisms underlying relapse from abstinence to drugs like alcohol and heroin. And if any of you want the programs, they're freely available. I can let you have them, because we'd like to build up a good data set using this core technology. So here's one of those programs. This basically gets people to look at emotional images from the International Affective Disorders image set. And you can see that when people look at an emotional image, there's a massive activation of the visual association cortex, and there's also activation of the amygdala. So This is another, perhaps more naturalistic way of probing the emotional reactivity of the amygdala in patients. The other technique, which is becoming used more and more as we begin to understand its power, is this technique of arterial spin labeling. And this puts a magnetic pulse into the blood in the neck and then measures the loss of that magnetism as the blood goes through the brain. And it's a powerful technique to explore blood flow. And you can, if you're fortunate, you can measure in real time drug effects. So this is a rather unique study. This is a study of the psychedelic drug psilocybin, the active ingredient of magic mushrooms. And you can see here that in 3 brain regions, these regions here, the injection of psilocybin produced profound reductions in blood flow. You can see this is a real-time change in blood flow as a result of giving this serotonergic agonist. And interestingly, those changes in blood flow correlated with the changes in subjective experience. So here we can have a direct link between the activity of a brain region and the psychological experience. And interestingly, more recently, we have done the same experiment, but this time using MDMA, colloquially known as ecstasy. This is a serotonin-releasing agent, and this produces similar reductions in blood flow, but in different regions. And the most powerful effect of MDMA is to turn off, particularly the amygdala and the hippocampus. And that probably explains why it reduces anxiety and also increases empathy between people. So these are good examples of the power of ASL. And then the other thing I want to talk about, because this is in many ways the most exciting development of all, it's not been applied to psychopharmacology as much as it could be, but undoubtedly will become the key tool for understanding brain function. And that is the power of imaging of the resting state. And now we have very good computers. We can look at the activity of the maybe up to 6,000 voxels in a brain when we do an MRI scan, and we can look at the activity in each of those voxels, maybe looking at that every 2 minutes through a 60-minute scan. So we generate an enormous data set, and then we can correlate activity in every voxel with every other voxel. And when you do that, you discover there are networks in the brain which you would never have imagined based on anatomy. And these are functional networks as opposed to anatomical networks. Okay, well, some of them you probably would have imagined based on anatomy. So there's a network in the visual system. This is the primary visual system. Here's the secondary, or the visual association system. Here's another visual system. Here's the auditory system. So these ones, yes, we knew about those from lesion studies and tumours, etc. But this one we didn't know about, the default mode network. And this is a remarkable network. It links the posterior cingulate cortex at the back here, the anterior cingulate, and parts of the brain called the retrospinal cortex. And this network only was discovered by imaging. And this is a network that is most active when you are thinking about yourself. So those of you who are thinking about what I'm saying at present, you're activating this network here and this network here, and probably some other ones relating to intention to remember what I say. But those of you who are dreaming off, thinking about what you're going to have for supper and why you became a psychiatrist in the first place, you're using this network here, the default mode. The default mode is the nearest we have to what Freud would call the ego. It's the part of the brain that really defines what you are. It contains your sense of self and your self-direction. And it's now being studied in disorders like depression, OCD, and addiction. And here is a really remarkable study in depression. And what you see here is the default mode, the anterior and the posterior poles of the default mode in normal controls and in people with major depressive disorder. And you can see more of that network. Well, that is engaged. That network is larger. It contains, it covers greater brain volume in the depressed people. And the greater the connectivity, the size of this network, the greater they ruminate. And this is a remarkable finding because it makes sense of the nature of rumination. Depressed people ruminate about their past, about their future. They feel guilty, they feel as if they've done wrong things and they've failed. And that rumination is introspective. This network is in hyperdrive in depression because people are engaged in that internally focused negative thinking. What's even more remarkable is we know that the driver for this hyperconnectivity comes from this region here, the subgenual cingulate cortex, which is a region that many imaging studies have now identified as being the driver for depression. So depression, we think now, is an active process where parts of the brain become overactive and drive rumination. They make people locked into a thought pattern which they cannot break out of. But treatments can disrupt that. And there are a number of treatments which seem to dampen down that subgenual cingulate region. Whether you get better on SSRIs or CBT or ECT, or even, as Helen Mayberg showed, if placebo gets you better, that region is damped down. So now we have an interesting new concept of depression, of a circuitry or a network hyperactivity driven by overactivity in this particular brain region. We have been doing work now using psilocybin in depression because it too disrupts the default mode. Here you see a side view of one of our average brain in our studies. You see the anterior cingulate cortex here. We put what's called a seed here. We measure activity in this little table tennis ball sized piece of brain, and we see where it's connected. And this part is connected to the frontal lobe, but it's also connected in activity terms to the posterior cingulate. And it's anti-connected with the sensory motor strip. And after a 5-HT2 agonist, you see complete disruption of the connectivity. In fact, it becomes anti-correlated with the posterior cingulate. So we can disrupt the default mode with these drugs, and we think this may not only explain why they're psychedelic, but also potentially explain why they could have utility in depression. And under the psychedelic experience of psilocybin, there's a complete alteration in the way the brain is connected. Another concept which has come out in recent years is the so-called small world concept of brain function. So if you look at connectivity in a normal resting state brain, you see that regions that are close together anatomically, like the visual cortex, the motor cortex or whatever, they connect to each other. And that's called the small world, because they're quite local connections. There are a few long connections, but not very many. When you are in a psychedelic state, there are just as many connections here as here, but many more of them are across the brain, and fewer of them are in the small world. So psychedelics open up the brain to connections which are not normally made. And that explains the psychedelic states, but also could explain why these drugs have a potential for treating disorders where you have hyperconnectivity, like depression and addiction. And I'm proud to say that for the first time in my life, I managed to get one of my studies on the same page as the British Parliament. Sometimes I think these people will be better off taking this stuff, but that's another story. Because here is the study which came out last week showing the nature of complex hallucinations, the effect of psychedelics to allow people to see things with their eyes closed. We now know is due to the fact that the small world becomes a large world, and under LSD, parts of the brain which normally have no connectivity with the visual cortex are connected. So people can see things from any point of their life and their memory, etc. And this has implications for understanding disorders where you get hallucinations such as schizophrenia. And we also know now that the sense of self, the sense of where you are in the world, is strongly determined by the posterior cingulate cortex. And the more you switch off this region with psychedelics, the greater the sense of disorganization that people have. And again, that has some interesting predictions for the nature of schizophrenia, particularly, I think, individuals going into their first episode, when the world begins to fall apart and their sense of who they are and why they're here becomes a bit disrupted. So we can do a lot with fMRI, but there's another technique I want to share with you which is much less used, but also particularly interesting in relation to psychopharmacology, and this is MEG. And this is a way of looking at electrical activity in the brain. MRI looks at blood flow, which is indirectly correlated with brain activity, but MEG looks at electrical activity, and it does it by measuring the magnetic changes produced by the electrical flow around the skull. You can look at the cortex, and it has fantastic time resolution. So the time resolution of fMRI is of the order of a minute or something at the best. Whereas this, we can measure time down to milliseconds. And I'm going to show you some data. So this is a set of studies that I've been part of with my colleague Suresh. I don't know how you say his last name, but it's you can read it. He's a MEG expert in Cardiff. Now he's moved to New Zealand. And we set out to try to produce a fingerprint of different kinds of drugs that change consciousness. And here you go. We go from Zolpidem, an alpha-1 synaptic GABA-A positive allosteric modulator, Goboxidol, an extrasynaptic GABA-A positive modulator, Tiagabine, a GABA uptake blocker, an anticonvulsant, Propofol, an anesthetic, alcohol, a bit of everything, anesthetic come sedative come aggression producing agent. Peramparel, the first AMPA antagonist, also an anticonvulsant. Ketamine, psilocybin, and LSD. And you don't have to be a scientist to say that these are different. The GABA drugs, particularly the ones which enhance extrasynaptic GABA, have profoundly different effects than the 5-HT drugs. Alcohol has a different profile to any of the drugs, but it has certain overlaps with drugs like propofol, the anesthetic, in this frequency range, but it's maybe a bit more like ketamine when we look at the theta range. So here we can see profound differences between drugs. And I would like to have every drug studied under MEG, because I think it's a remarkably powerful way of exploring differences, at least in cortical action in drugs. And based on that work, particularly the findings with ketamine and psilocybin and LSD, we've come up with a new theory of consciousness, which essentially says that there are two dimensions of consciousness. There's a dimension which is driven by the GABA-glutamate system, where glutamate keeps you awake and arouses you and allows you to focus and lay down memories, and GABA has the opposite effect. And there's a serotonergic system, probably driven through the 2A receptor, which is the psychedelic state, and that's got something to do with changing the way you think about the world, even though it has no impact on how you remember things. So I think this is quite an interesting innovation in terms of thinking about the way in which the brain can explore the nature of consciousness itself. I should say something about PET, because that's what I do as well. I'm a great believer in PET, but it's a very expensive technology that not many centres have. And I just want to share with you a couple of recent discoveries that are of some interest, I hope. Currently, the only neurotransmitter we can reliably measure using PET in the brain is dopamine. And we can do that using this tracer or similar tracers that bind to the dopamine D2 receptor. And the technique we use is very straightforward. We put in the tracer, which is this, the radioligand here, these little triangles, and with dopamine, if we decrease dopamine in the brain by giving a blocker of the synthesis, like alpha-methylparatyrosine, we reduce dopamine and we get more tracer binding. And if we increase dopamine with a stimulant, we get less tracer binding. So we can indirectly estimate dopamine release by measuring the binding of the tracer. And I think one of the most interesting studies ever done in psychiatry is this one, done now 16 years ago, by Mark Laruelle. And he asked the question, is there a disorder of dopamine in schizophrenia? Now, we all know that the drugs we use to treat schizophrenia are dopamine blocking drugs. But up to that point, we had assumed that there was something wrong with dopamine, but we didn't know. So Laruelle did this study. He took people who were psychotic, he admitted them to the ward in Colombia. Before he treated them with a neuroleptic, he gave them amphetamine to release dopamine and scanned them. And he showed that there was indeed a difference in the dopamine response to amphetamine in schizophrenia. The mean was higher. And the greater the release of dopamine, the greater the psychotic response to amphetamine. At least in most people. So if what you see here are the change in the rating scales, the PANSS rating scale following amphetamine, and some people got a lot worse, as you might predict, because amphetamine is pro-psychotic. But not everyone got worse. Some people got better. And this was an interesting person, because this person got better despite a big increase in dopamine. And so from these data, you can postulate that maybe there are two kinds of schizophrenia. There are those where too much dopamine is a bad thing, and maybe here, people with too little dopamine. And I'm pleased to say, after 15 years, now other groups are beginning to take up Mark's ideas and see whether there is we can stratify people with schizophrenia based on their dopamine responses. We've been particularly interested in the question of endorphins. We know that endorphins are important in modulating pain in people who have pain syndromes. We wonder if they're involved in pleasure and in stress. And it's not easy to get endorphin release in the brain. Some people have done pain studies. We decided to do a study using amphetamine because there's animal literature that says that dopamine released by amphetamine can cause endorphin release. And so we did a PET study using carfentanil, which is a mu PET tracer, and we showed that in some parts of the brain, particularly here in the putamen, but also here in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the executive centers of the brain, that there was a reduction in confentanyl binding caused by amphetamine. So this suggests that amphetamine is releasing endorphin in these regions. And then we replicated that and also showed when we put the two data sets together, there was also a release of endorphins in the nucleus accumbens, which, as you know, is a region particularly involved in learning behavior and including behaviors which can be addictive. So we wonder now whether endorphins are the second neurotransmitter or hormone we can measure using PET. We've also gone on, and I'll talk more about this on Friday evening at the addiction workshop. We've now shown that there's an interesting deficiency in endorphin release in people with addiction. And here's the first data set just published. These are people with pathological gambling, and they seem to release no endorphins in some brain regions, particularly the insula and the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex following amphetamine. And we're beginning to wonder whether maybe the reason these people gamble is because they cannot get endorphin responses from more normal activities. So for the second part of my talk, I've called it from the sublime, which is the beautiful way we can image the brain, to the ridiculous, which is really how we have been thinking about psychopharmacology for the last 60 years, and how we need to do better. And I don't suppose any of you have probably ever heard of the ATC classification, let alone looked it up. But this is a classification that is underpinned by the WHO, and which classifies all drugs that are used in medicine around the world. And this is a classification of drugs for the nervous system. And you will see here that drugs we call antidepressants are part of a class of drugs called psychoanalytics, and they come into 5 classes: non-selective monoamine oxidase inhibitors, SSRIs, selective monoamine oxidase inhibitors, non-selective and MAO selective, and then others. And a few years ago, a group of us began to think that this was not a particularly useful system. A system of classification where the largest class is others is actually not particularly sensible. And also there are other problems you're all aware of when we think about classifications. We have different abbreviations or acronyms. We have SSRIs, we have SNRIs, we have NASAs, we have tricyclics, we have atypicals, etc. And these aren't necessarily useful. And I'll give you an example. So we all know what this means. SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Okay, so here I am. I'm a professor at Imperial College London. I'm teaching psychopharmacology to my second year medical students, hoping they're going to become psychiatrists. And I say, okay, so if SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, what is an SNRI? And they're very clever people, and they say, well, it's a selective noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor, obviously. And then you say, oh, sorry, no. I'm afraid that's wrong. It's actually the serotonin noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor. And they say, why? And you say, well, that's because someone told us that's what it was. Who? Well, that was what Wyeth called it when they launched the vaccine. And then if you think, do I want to be a psychiatrist when you don't even have control over how you name your drugs? And they think, well, it's true. Psychiatrists are all bonkers. And then you get to this one, the NASA. I mean, what are NASAs? Anyone know what a NASA is? Is it a noradrenaline serotonin receptor antagonist? Is it a noradrenaline antihistamine and serotonin? Is it a okay, exhausted even reading it out. I don't know what a NASA is. I don't think the people that invented the term organelle back in those days, I don't think they even know what it means anymore. So it kind of doesn't help us very much. And also, we still rely on the old structural definition, tricyclic. Well, that's great, isn't it? Because half of our antipsychotics are tricyclics, and most of our antihistamines are tricyclic. We even have tricyclic antibiotics. So what the hell's the point in calling anything a tricyclic? And then we've got all these new drugs, which are others. And the others will grow and grow until they become the dominant class. So a few years ago, I wrote this paper in the British Journal, the Journal of Psychopharmacology, the BAP journal, because I was horrified that, having worked in this field for 30 years, I'd never heard of the term psychoanaleptic. So I wanted to tell the world how ignorant I was, but also suggest a better way forward. And it seemed to me, like I'm sure it would seem to most of you, that we could at least classify drugs according to their targets, because we do know a fair bit about what the targets are. And there are only 4 targets, really. There's enzyme inhibitors, there's reuptake inhibitors, there's drugs that work on receptors, and there are drugs which may work on several of those simultaneously. In fact, some of you will say, hang on, there are drugs which work on ion channels as well, and I'll come to that later. And so at least we made some advance in that particular paper. We decided that drugs which worked on more than one kind of target, whether in the case of the drugs on the left, they'd be receptors and reuptake, or on the right it would be uptake and monoamine oxidase. These would be called multimodal drugs. So we could reformulate the WHO system according to this kind of scheme. But actually that process of starting that discussion led to the ECMP, and particularly Yossi Zohar, who was president at the time, deciding we should go further and we should actually try to set up an agreed classification for psychotropic drugs. And to do that, to have a worldwide agreement, we obviously had to bring in the expert groups that look after our discipline around the world. So that's the ACMP, the Asian College of Neuropsychopharmacology, the CIMP, and also we link with IUPHAR, which is the International Union of Basic and Clinical Pharmacology, because they have a very, very detailed and sophisticated online database of pretty much every drug that has ever been discovered, whether it's a medicine or not. And here are the people on that working party. Yossi Zohar was chairing it, and then people with a great knowledge of psychopharmacology like Stephen Stahl and Pierre Blier, but also people who thought a lot about classification systems like David Kupfer. They joined the group because they realised that if we got this right, we could actually lay down a way of thinking about drugs which would stand potentially the test of time for maybe another half a century. And we've published a couple of papers on this project now, and hopefully you'll have read some of them. And the first thing to do was turn it into an app. So now, those of you who got your PDAs with you, I will not be offended if you go onto them now, and instead of looking at the soccer results, you go and log on to NBN, and you're going to get hold of this wonderful data set. So just log on, there's 109 drugs in there, and you can look at that, all sorts of knowledge about these drugs. So this is a live data set which is being added to every 6 months. And the way it works is like this. We have essentially 3 dimensions which define a drug. The first is the pharmacological target and the mode of action. The second dimension is whether it's licensed as a medication and in which countries it's licensed. The third dimension, it relates to more clinical use that is not currently licensed for, such as, but where there's good controlled trials, but also significant side effects. And then we have a section called Practical Notes, which is basically where we put the collective wisdom of all those people who are part of the task force. And because it's an organic, web-based program, we can add in data that you provide. If you provide us with interesting insights, the practical notes can be enhanced. And then it will grow, and eventually it will grow so there's another page for each drug which relates to the neurobiology. Well, that's a huge task, and it'll take us some years to complete that. Let me give you a worked example. Here's amisulpride, which you all know. It's a very simple molecule. It's a dopamine-targeted drug, and it's a dopamine receptor antagonist, and the target receptor is the D2 receptor. Its indications are schizophrenia, and the side effects are extrapyramidal side effects, tardive dyskinesia, and increased prolactin. Practical note, the low dose might be presynaptically preferring, which is supported by some people's view that at a low dose, say 50 to maybe 200 milligrams, there are some kind of pro-activating effects of amisulpride. Here's a much more complicated drug, amitriptyline. We're calling this a serotonin multimodal, because its primary action is on serotonin, but it also has activity as a norepinephrine, a noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor, but it's also a serotonin receptor antagonist. Now, amitriptyline does many other things than that, as I'll show you in a minute, but we think those are the core targets which underpin its therapeutic value. So its licensed indications, to mention two, are major depressive disorder and chronic pain. Efficacy, it improves symptoms of depression and anxiety and chronic pain in low doses. Side effects, dry mouth, blurred vision, urinary hesitancy, constipation due to the muscarinic blockade, orthostatic hypotension from the alpha-1 noradrenaline blockade, and potentially toxic and overdose to cardiac problems. And then practical notes. In low doses, it's primarily a 5-HT2 and an H1, histamine H1 antagonist, and there's a bit about metabolism, etc. So hopefully now, those of you who've gone online can go and see those and any other drug you like. We're rolling it out. Next month is a big month because we now have about 10 major journals, including the ECMP journal, the British journal, the American journal, Biological Psychiatry. They're all going to roll out this, which is important because when you are submitting papers, you're going to be requested to frame them using this technology. And there's a glossary that will help you rewrite your paper. So instead of writing, I studied this SNRI, you will write, I studied this drug, which is a serotonin and noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor. And the other important point about this is that for the first time, decision-making on the naming of drugs was taken back by the scientific community. We now meet twice a year. We invite drug companies to come to those meetings and present their new drugs to us, and we then agree with them what the acceptable terminology is. And if they don't like it, well, they can go away and use their own terminology, but they will not be able to put that into reputable journals. And most of them have said, okay, it's more important that we're in the scientific field than we're in the marketing field. So I think we've actually now made at least a major advance in having a dialogue about nomenclature for new drugs. And hopefully over the years, over the next 10 or so years, you'll all gradually pick up this nomenclature. It's not easy, and I still keep talking about antidepressants when I really should be talking about drugs for depression. But the younger ones of you with more flexible minds, I'm sure, will get it right. I just want to finish by talking about something else which is not quite out there in the public domain yet, but which will be very shortly. And this is a way of visualizing psychotropic drugs. And it's called the VPM Library, Visualizing Psychotropic Medicines Library. And this is a website which, as I say, will be going live fairly soon. And it's based on that original insight of the paper we put together in 2009. You can essentially explain the actions of every drug by their effects on one of or more of 4 different proteins, either receptor proteins, transporter proteins, enzymes, or ion channels. So this is how VPM works. You have the name of the drug, you have color coding around it to help you remember what kind of drug it is, and then you have 4 targets, 4 stations the drug can go to. You will see this is based on the London Tube Map, which has turned out to be an enormously powerful way of visualizing data. The color coding tells you whether the drug is a transporter drug, a receptor drug, an enzyme drug, an ion channel targeted drug, or a multimodal drug. Then the vaccine, blue, transporter drug. Here you see the line from venlafaxine goes to the serotonin transporter, green, serotonin. All the different transmitters are color coded. The serotonin transporter is filled. That tells us that venlafaxine blocks it. But also, as you know, venlafaxine also goes to the noradrenaline transporter, which is also filled because it blocks that too. These lines are solid lines because these are both important in the therapeutic efficacy. The serotonin symbol is above the noradrenaline symbol because venlafaxine has higher affinity for the serotonin transporter than the noradrenaline. So let's go back to amitriptyline. Well, what you see here is it's yellow, it's a multimodal drug. It has higher affinity for the serotonin than the noradrenaline transporter, and it is a blocker of both. It also is a blocker of the histamine receptor, the 5-HT2 receptor, the muscarinic 1-4 receptors, and the alpha-1 noradrenaline receptor. The 5-HT2 line is a solid line. We think that's therapeutically important. The dotted line to these other receptors tells us that these are not therapeutically necessary, but they contribute to the adverse effects. The highest affinity of amitriptyline is at the H1 receptor, and then as you go down, you get lower affinity. But all those affinities are in a range of less than 20 times those of the serotonin transporter. So when you engage this transporter, you will engage all of those. Here's another multimodal drug you may have heard of, vortioxetine, Brintellix, a serotonin transporter blocker, a 5-HT3 receptor antagonist, and a 5-HT1A agonist. And here you see an agonist. The circle with a hole in the middle is an agonist, a circle that's filled is an antagonist, and a circle that's half filled is a partial agonist. So I'll just finish by going through a couple of drugs for psychosis. Here's amisulpride, back to the very simple drug. It's a receptor-acting drug because it's got an orange circle around the name, and it just works on the D2 receptor. And it's an antagonist because that's filled. Oops. Haloperidol. Haloperidol is a D2 receptor blocker, but it also has some blocking action on alpha-1 receptors. And that's why we don't use it intravenously anymore. Because if you give a pulse of haloperidol, the alpha-1 blocking effect can lead to low blood pressure and people falling over. So this is a dotted line, it's an unwanted effect. Aripiprazole, highest affinity at the D2 receptor, where it's a partial agonist, a half-filled circle. It's also a partial agonist at the 1A receptor and an antagonist at the 2A receptor. And we believe, or at least I believe, that all those three are relevant to its therapeutic action. Risperidone, very high affinity 5-HT2 antagonist. Every dose of risperidone you use will occupy pretty much all the 5-HT2A receptors in the brain. At lower affinity, the D2 receptor, we think these are therapeutically important, as is the blocking effect of the alpha-2 receptor, which can enhance cognitive function. Whereas the blocking effects of the alpha-1 receptor and the histamine receptor are not therapeutic. And in fact, the blocking effect of the alpha-1 receptor is why you have to up-titrate risperidone. You cannot go straight in with 6 milligrams a day, otherwise people get low blood pressure and fall over. This is a world record drug for the number of interactions. This is clozapine. You see that the highest affinity of clozapine is for the H1 receptor, and then for the muscarinic receptors. And of course, these are the receptor interactions which are dotted lines, so they're not therapeutic, but these are the ones that cause the problems of weight gain and sedation, etc. It's then a 2A receptor antagonist, which is therapeutic, an alpha-2 antagonist, which is therapeutic, a 5-HT1A partial agonist, which is therapeutic, and then the D2 receptor blockade, which is therapeutic. So when you have given enough clozapine to block the D2 receptors, you have occupied all these receptors, at least to a point of over 60% occupation. And then quetiapine, which is, here you see that it's, again, weak D2 activity, but also the metabolite, norquetiapine, has some noradrenaline uptake blocking properties. And this is why we think quetiapine can, in lower doses, be an antidepressant as well as being an antipsychotic at higher doses. So I'll stop now. I hope I've shown you that there may be simple ways of visualizing psychotropic medication, and this will be online fairly soon. And those of you who follow me on Twitter, as soon as it's fully online, I will tweet it, and then you can go and explore it. Thank you very much.
Profesör Nata klinik bilimlere, temel bilimlerden klinik bilimlere bu heyecan verici konuşmasından dolayı teşekkür ederiz. Sizlerden soru almak istiyorum. Bu konuda sorusu olanlar varsa lütfen elini kaldırabilirse benim de görmem daha kolay olacaktır. Buyurun, arkadan bir arkadaşımız var.
Merhaba, çok değerli sunum için teşekkür ediyorum Sayın Nata. En son anlattığı bu yeni sınıflandırma, ilaçları sınıflandırma sistemiyle ilgili birkaç eleştirim ve sorum olacak. Benim anladığım kadarıyla David'in eleştirisi sanki esas ilaçları sınıflandırmasından ziyade işte DSM, ICD gibi tanı sınıflandırma de içine alan bir eleştiri gibi geldi. Çünkü şimdi mevcut durumda işte SSRI'lar, SNRI'lar, trisiklikler vesaire gibi sınıflandırdığımız ilaçları bir de diğerleri var. Diğerlerine büyük bir eleştiri geliyordu. Fakat yeni sistemle, önerilen sistemle işte 109 tane ilacı hepsini diğerleri kutusuna atıyoruz. Yani elimizde hiç olmazsa çok işimize yaramaz da olsa bazen bozuk olarak da giden bir sistem var. Alıştığımız en azından bir sistem var. İşte DSM vesaire gibi sınıflandırmalarda muayenelere göre hastanın muayenesinde işte tansiyon sistemlerinde depresyonu mu var, ansiyetesi mi var vesairesi mi var, bunları tespit edip ona göre verdiğimiz bir takım ilaçlar var. Ama yeni sistemde çok güzel bulduğum tarafları da var. Yani yeni sistemde özellikle işte hastaları muayene ederken dokununerjik etkinliğinin azalıp azalmadığını düşünmemiz gerekiyor. Beyindeki işte dikkat sistemlerinin, enerjisinin, enerjisiyle bağlı işte noradrenerjik sistemlerinin acaba etkilenmemi bizi düşünmeye sevk ediyor. Ama bu kadar büyük bir grubu, psikiyatri camiasını özellikle ele alıyorum. Harekete geçirebilmek bana oldukça zor gibi geliyor. Teşekkür ediyorum. Endişelerimden bunlar. Sağ olun.
you're quite right. And we've had an awful lot of discussion about this. I mean, there's a great appeal in a simple system. These are antidepressants. But of course, we know that many of the antidepressants, but not all, are also good for anxiety too. And it's a balance between simplicity and being comprehensive and being valuable. And I think we've succeeded because what we have now with the NBN, we have it online. So you don't have to remember the 109 drugs because you can search. So if you go onto the app and you can search drugs for depression, and then that will bring up just those drugs for depression. And that makes it a lot easier for you to understand how to treat depression. So I think because we have this rather good indexing system, we can have 109 drugs unclassified, and then you can pull out drugs with side effects like sedation or weight gain or no. You can use it in an interactive way to try to find the drug you want for a particular disorder. So I hope that helps. I mean, it's basically building something based on pharmacology, and because we think that if our students understand pharmacology, they will be better doctors. At present, just telling them this is an antidepressant, oh, but it's also an anxiolytic, it doesn't really help them. Any questions? Down the front.
Doktor Yazım Bey, Marmara Üniversitesi'nden. Ben de çok teşekkür ediyorum konuşmanız için. Gerçekten ufuk açıcı bir konuşma. Merak ettiğim bir şey var. Yani bu konu çok ilgi duyduğum bir konu değil. Onun için bilinen bir şey de soruyor olabilirim ama. Görüntüleme yöntemlerinde reseptörleri veya bir takım başka maddeleri trace edip radyoligandla bir takım filmler çekiyoruz. Verdiğimiz ilaç olarak molekülleri trace edip onların beyine nasıl bir etki yaptığı, nerelere gidip ne yaptığını araştıran görüntüleme teknikleri var mı? Yani atıyorum mesela klozapini trace edip beyinde nereye gidiyor, ne yapıyor? Bunu bilmenin bir yolu var mı? Yani merak ettiğim şey neden bilirsin?
Yeah. That's a really very, very good question. And it's actually quite an economically important question because there are a number of compounds which were developed by companies as potential treatments in psychiatry, which failed in clinical trials. And then subsequently, when they did PET studies, they showed they didn't get in the brain. So there is this concept of target engagement, which most companies adhere to, that they will not put a drug into a clinical trial for a brain disorder unless it gets in the brain. So that can help us. In terms of looking at the kinetics in the brain of drugs we currently use, very few of them have been labelled. The reason for that is that most of them do not make very good tracers because they're very lipophilic and you get a lot of background non-specific activity. So what we tend to do is the opposite. We tend to preload the person and then see if it displaces or prevents the occupation of the receptor by a much more selective substance. But there are some examples of where drugs have been labelled to monitor brain entry. I mean, benzodiazepines is one. You can see they're getting pretty fast. Cocaine has been labelled, that gets them very fast, which is why it's very addictive. So there are just a few examples of drugs where the label itself has been useful to predict kinetics. But mostly we use the drug to displace a known tracer. Yeah.
Kendinizi de tanıtırsanız.
Murat Seviz Gata'dan hocamıza teşekkür ederim sunum için. Çok da faydalandım. Ben aslında ilk soru üzerine gideceğim. Ben David bu sunduğu sisteme açıkçası buna dayalı yürüdüğümüzü düşünüyorum. Çünkü artık kategorik sınıflandırmalar tedavilerde bir nevi gitmiyor. Yani şöyle söyleyeyim, sadece antidepresanlar üzerinden tedaviler yürümüyor. Şöyle ki kaç hasta kaldı depresyon tedavisinin antipsikotin eklenmediği veya kaç hasta OKB'de sadece işte SSRI'ları veya SNRI'ları kullanıyor. Şu artık yetmiyor sanki bir şeyler ve kompleks düşünmek. Sanki artık kategorik sınıflandırmalar değil de serotonin, noradrenalin ve dopamin üzerinden veya işte daha değişik bulunan sistemler üzerinden düşünmek gerekiyor ki pratiğe bakıp içeri proteinle ilgili hastaların kullanılan tedavilerden de bu durum kendini doğruluyor bence.
Well, thank you. Yes, that's exactly what we thought. We do need to become better doctors. We need to understand the medicines we use. And I think the example that you gave of when you're giving a so-called antipsychotic to augment an SSRI, how is that working? And by thinking about the pharmacology, as I did and showed you, at least we begin to know, at least we know what question to ask. So if you are augmenting an SSRI, say, with olanzapine, well, you know what the pharmacology is. Is it the histamine? Probably not. Is it the muscarinic blockade? Possibly. Is it the 5-HT2 blockade? Well, maybe that is, because a lot of the augmenting drugs do have significant 5-HT2 blocking properties. So I think this approach can help you make sense of what you're doing, but also the industry start to think, hang on, maybe this is a new target. Maybe we should be thinking about a 5-HT2, 2A antagonist as an augmenting agent. So we think it could invigorate research because companies will be have better understanding of what's happened. Because I think one of the saddest things of all was when aripiprazole was launched. Bristol Myers Squibb, they didn't really understand, none of us really understood what a dopamine partial agonist would do. And they thought, well, it's too difficult to understand, why don't we just say it's an atypical because it's different from chlorpromazine or haloperidol. So they call it an atypical. And we all thought, oh, well, it's just like olanzapine, which has been launched 5 years before, or risperidone. But of course it wasn't. Because it's a partial agonist, it had very, very different pharmacology in people who had stopped a dopamine antagonist. And it took years for them to get over that problem of people saying this drug is terrible because it causes all these side effects, which are actually withdrawal from haloperidol or olanzapine, plus the partial agonism. So I strongly think that we can't really progress unless if the companies don't know what they're doing, inventing drugs, what hope have we got? And this will at least make them think that, people know that these drugs are different. You can't just say, oh, they're all the same, but ours is better. You can clearly see they're different.
Evet, başka bir soru var mı hocam?
Buyurun Deniz. Kendini tanıtırsan.
Deniz Gürbüz, Marmara Üniversitesi'nden. Şimdi eski sınıflamayla ilgili şöyle bir durum vardı. Hastalarla ortak dil kurmamıza birazcık daha yardımcı oluyordu. Yani hasta ben ne kullanıyorum dediğinde şu anda SSRI'ler, SNRI'ler böyle çok basında da çıkan, haberlerde de çıkan çok bilinen ilaçlar olduğu için hastalara ilaçlarını anlatmakta biz çok fazla bir sıkıntı yaşamıyoruz ve ortak dil kullanımı birazcık daha rahat oluyor ve hastanın işine birazcık daha rahat uygulayabiliriz. Bu yeni sınıflamanın tabii ki bizim ilaçları anlamamız açısından önemi çok büyük, daha iyi. Ama bunlar da bu yeni bir ortak dil geliştirmek için sizin bir öneriniz var mı? Hastalara bunu birazcık daha, yani yeni bir ortak dil geliştirmek gerekir mi?
That's a really, really very interesting question. And of course, one of the reasons we did this was because of the patients who say, excuse me, you just put me on olanzapine when I'm depressed. Am I psychotic? And you say, no, you're not psychotic, but we can augment the antidepressant with the olanzapine. And they say, but why? and how. And then what I would say to my patients is because there's a pharmacology of olanzapine which adds to the pharmacology of the SSRI. So I am not treating you as if you're psychotic. I am treating you with a pharmacological agent that can help, and you're not psychotic. So we hope that this would diffuse or reduce some of the anxieties that patients have when they're being put on drugs that have a name for a different indication. But I completely agree with you that we need to think through how we can communicate this to patients, and we are beginning to engage in a dialogue with patients about this, because we know there are some expert patients out there who have already gone through and checked the NDN and are sort of coming back with comments. And we are planning to have discussions with patient groups, because I think if we could refine the knowledge of the patients so that doctors have to really keep up to speed to keep ahead of their patients, then we're going to have a win-win. Because patients will understand what you're doing, and doctors will be at the cutting edge of what they should be doing. But this is an organic process. This process will evolve and continue to evolve over forever, probably. And it's certainly going to evolve very fast in the next 10 years.
Başka bir soru?
Yok herhalde. Kuvvetli bir alkışla Profesör Makar teşekkür ediyoruz.